In this video, we're going to talk about the top 4 facts regarding the 2025 Toyota Grand Highlander. Specifically, we're going to talk about the maintenance difference or lack of difference between the hybrid version and the non-hybrid version. That's right, everyone. The debate is real if you should be going with the 2025 non-hybrid Grand Highlander like the XLE or the limited package, or if you should be spending a little bit more and going after that hybrid equivalent, whether it's the XLE, the Limited, the Platinum. Maybe you have some concerns over the actual reliability or maintenance cost or scheduled routine maintenance of that hybrid equivalent versus the combustion only powertrain system. Well, I'm going to break it down for you just ahead. Starting with the most important, perhaps the most controversial topic, which is the scheduled routine maintenance recommendation from Toyota on the non-hybrid Toyota Grand Highlander versus the hybrid. Now, regardless what type of Toyota vehicle you have, whether it's a hybrid, non-hybrid, a plug-in hybrid, a Camry, a Highlander, whatever the case is, Toyota's recommended routine maintenance schedule intervals are around every 8,000 kilometers. Now, I'm going to put links in the description below so you can check out exactly what is involved and what is entailed for your service department to do to your Toyota vehicle during each service, service number 1, service number 2, and service number 3. For the most part, it does comprise of a handful of visual and hands-on inspections, sometimes rotating of the tires, replacing the engine oil and filter, sometimes the wiper blades as well. But what we're going to look at specifically here is the scheduled maintenance on, let's say, a 2025 Toyota Grand Highlander non-hybrid XLE, and we're going to put it up against the hybrid equivalent XLE 2025 Grand Highlander. You may be surprised that there is a little less to be done to the hybrid version than the non-hybrid version. Take a look. Now, I've mentioned this before in some of my other videos, even my latest video. If you want to check it out, I'll leave a link to that as well in the description below. But there are certain moving parts that help get your vehicle going that are in a non-hybrid Toyota that just simply don't exist in the hybrid equivalents. For example, starters, alternators, as well as if you take a look in pretty much every other service interval on the non-hybrid Grand Highlander, you're required to have the propeller shaft bolts tightened at 16,000 kilometers, at 32,000 kilometers, 48,000 kilometer service interval, and upwards. Now, the propeller shaft on a Toyota vehicle is basically a bar or a shaft, if you want to call it, that delivers the torque from the transmission to the differential, which is then transmitted to the wheels to help get your Toyota vehicle going. And this is something that's not required to be done on the hybrid version because the hybrid equivalents do not have propeller shafts. Taking a closer look, guys, at the 48,000 kilometer interval for the non-hybrid Grand Highlander, you are required to perform a certain amount of maintenances over and above what you are required to do on the hybrid equivalent. For example, you will have to replace the rear differential fluid, replace the transfer case fluid, and again, tighten the propeller shaft bolts at 48,000 kilometers on Grand Highlander XLE. Whereas on the hybrid version, you're still going to do the service number 2, which is same as the non-hybrid. Inspect the block heater if you do have a block heater equipped on your Grand Highlander, and you will have to replace the brake fluid. Now, these are all recommended routine scheduled maintenances as per Toyota. And you're also required to replace the spark plugs at about 64,000 kilometer service interval on the non-hybrid Grand Highlander 2025 XLE, for example, whereas you're not required to do something like this on the hybrid version. Now, in between these routine scheduled maintenance recommendations from Toyota, you will also run into certain wear and tear items that will need to be addressed. For example, the brake equipment itself, the pads, the rotors, probably somewhere in and around the 48,000 kilometer range up to around the 64,000 kilometer range is when you may need to service your brakes on the non-hybrid Grand Highlanders. And depending on your overall driving style and habits and general use of the vehicle, a brake maintenance or brake replacement can take place sooner or later depending on your specific situation. However, if you're driving the hybrid equivalent Grand Highlander, whether it's the XLE or the Limited, the 2024 or the 2025, you may be able to delay this brake job equipment and this brake replacement cost a little bit further than as if you were driving the non-hybrid version. And that is because in hybrid Toyotas, when you are braking, you are also using regenerative braking, which helps take a little bit of the pressure off the actual brake system itself. Regenerative braking assists your vehicle in slowing down and can reduce wear and tear on the brakes over the life of your vehicle. And I know I'm going to get asked this question in the comments below, so I might as well talk about it. What about the Grand Highlander Hybrid Platinum, which has the Hybrid Max powertrain system, 362 horsepower? What's the maintenance like on this Grand Highlander? Well, you'll be happy to know that it's nearly identical to the scheduled routine recommended maintenance from Toyota, which is on the Grand Highlander 25 XLE Hybrid, although on the Grand Highlander Hybrid Platinum, you are required and it's recommended to replace the spark plugs at around 64,000 kilometer service interval, whereas this is only applicable and recommended on the non-hybrid 25 Grand Highlander XLE. But on the hybrid equivalent, you do not have to do that. On the Platinum, which has the Hybrid Max, you are required to replace the spark plugs, like I said, right around the 64,000 kilometer service interval. All right, everyone, like I mentioned before, there's really not much that has to be done that's different on the hybrid version Grand Highlanders versus the non-hybrid version Grand Highlanders, other than the fact of maybe changing out and replacing the hybrid high voltage battery air filter every once in a while, which will be part of one of your services, whether it's service number 1, 2, or 3. But like I mentioned, and like I just showed you, in fact, there's actually less required recommended routine maintenance on the hybrid version Grand Highlanders versus the non-hybrid versions. Let's talk about fact number 2. So, in terms of the overall waiting period or waiting time for a Grand Highlander, you can typically get yourself into a Grand Highlander non-hybrid within a couple of months. You might even be able to find one available at your dealer, depending on where exactly you're located, what city, province, etc. When it comes time to the Grand Highlander Hybrid, it's a different story and a different topic. For the most part, you do have to put in a factory order and actually wait for that vehicle to come in from the manufacturer once it's built. That can take anywhere from 6 months to 8 months to 12 months, depending on exactly where you're located. Now, I won't give you an exact wait time because, well, that's not really fair to the viewers because it's specific on where you are from and where you are located. But if you have any specific questions on wait time, feel free to leave a question in the comments below, and I will do my best to get back to you. So to summarize this fact number 2, you can get a Grand Highlander non-hybrid quite faster or much faster, I would say, when compared against the Grand Highlander Hybrid. So if you're in a little bit of a hurry or a rush, or if you're without a vehicle at all, well, then you may have to steer towards the non-hybrid instead of going with the hybrid Grand Highlander. Fact number 3 about the Grand Highlander: you will save fuel by going with the hybrid equivalent. There's no question. Yes, it's a large SUV, 7-passenger, 8-passenger. They come with some pretty large standard equipped alloy wheels. And yes, it's quite heavy of an SUV, but regardless of the facts that I mentioned, you are still going to save fuel, whether it's with the XLE hybrid, the Limited hybrid, or even the hybrid Max powertrain system, which is on the Platinum. You will save fuel. There's no question about it. Depending on exactly how you drive, where you drive, your driving style, if you're driving in mostly colder temperatures, for example, -5, 10, 15 degrees, the hybrid systems on Toyotas and other hybrid vehicles for that matter tend to work a little less efficiently in temperatures like this, and that's because of a chemical reaction that takes place in the hybrid powertrain system itself. It takes a little bit longer to actually happen when it's that cold outside, so keep that in mind. But all this being said, you still will save money on fuel versus the non-hybrid Grand Highlanders. That is a fact. Fact number 4, everyone: you will spend more upfront with acquiring or purchasing your Grand Highlander Hybrid versus the non-hybrid. That's a fact. They are priced more or priced higher between each other from the manufacturer. Whether you're getting one brand new or whether you're getting one pre-owned, you will generally see a price gap of anywhere between $2,000 to $4,000 on the non-hybrid Grand Highlanders versus the hybrid equivalents. So with that being said, if you're buying or leasing or financing a Grand Highlander on a bit of a budget, or you're trying to obtain a specific payment, you may find yourself being able to achieve that more so on the non-hybrid version versus the hybrid version. But keep in mind, like I said on the previous fact, you will save fuel on the Grand Highlander Hybrid versus the non-hybrid. So for the most part, depending on how you drive and where you drive and your driving style and habits, most of that surplus in pricing between the non-hybrid and the hybrid will get compensated and will get taken care of for the most part over the life of you owning and driving that vehicle on the hybrid version versus the non-hybrid. My last piece of advice to add, and I say this because we own a Toyota Sienna hybrid in the family. I did drive also at the same time a Grand Highlander Hybrid XLE. What I have to say about that is the Grand Highlander is almost the perfect alternative to a Toyota Sienna. The cargo space is quite similar. The seating capacity is quite similar as well. A few advantages that the Toyota Sienna Hybrid has over the Grand Highlander, whether it's the 24 model or the 25 model. Number one, the Sienna has way more options to choose from in terms of configuration and model selection. We have the LE in both front wheel and all wheel, the XLE, the XSE, whether you want the standard equipped or the tech package, and then we have the limited, and then we have the platinum. We do have far less options to choose from, at least for us here in Canada, on the Grand Highlander. That is fact number one regarding this topic. Fact number two regarding this topic is it is an absolute big difference and huge convenience, especially when you have kids, to have power sliding doors. That is the one setback. Of course, it's not possible to have power sliding doors on a Grand Highlander. That would just be silly. But if you're parking inside or indoors or in the garage, yes, the Grand Highlander does the job in terms of interior space and setup and cargo capacity. It's quite similar to the Toyota Sienna, but you will miss out on having that convenience of the power sliding doors that it just makes everything so much easier on the Toyota Sienna. So think carefully when you're deciding between the Grand Highlander and the Toyota Sienna Hybrid. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, topic, review, and comparison. And let me know what you think in the comments below. How cool is it that you're actually required and it's recommended to do less scheduled routine maintenance on the hybrid version Grand Highlanders when compared to the non-hybrid version Grand Highlanders? We'll catch you guys on the next video. Take care.